Good Sunday morning. My name is Jaden Jefferson, and welcome to this week's Community Focus. Joining me now, fresh off his conversation with President Joe Biden, he participated in a roundtable discussion in Washington, D.C., is Toledo Mayor Wade Kapszukiewicz. Good morning.
Good morning.
So it's an interesting thing you had going on because you had this roundtable discussion, and it all happened in one day with President Joe Biden and other mayors from around the country. So kind of give me an idea of what was discussed and what ideas were shared.
Well, it all came together very quickly. The White House called me on a Wednesday, and they were inviting me to an event that was to take place on Friday. So it was a very quick turnaround and not a lot of time to plan. I had to move some things around on my schedule, but of course, whenever the White House extends an invitation, I'm going to take it, and that would have been true no matter who the president was or what his or her party was. It's just something that I feel as mayor I have to do to represent the city, especially since we had been invited. So very specifically, it was a conversation the president wanted to have about the American Rescue Plan and his belief that more of it needs to be spent promoting public safety. So there were about 12 or 13 or so mayors and police chiefs from around the country. So it was not a very large group. I want to say there were 8 different communities represented. Obviously, Toledo, Detroit, mayor and police chief were there, Tampa, mayor and police chief, Houston, mayor and police chief, Kansas City, mayor and police chief, I think Baton Rouge, just the police chief, not the mayor. Tulsa, Oklahoma, just the mayor, not the police chief. So I'm not really sure, why in some cases they invited both and in other cases just one. But regardless, those were, like I said, about 7 or 8 cities, dozen or so people. So it wasn't a huge group. We met in the cabinet room of the West Wing, right adjacent to the Oval Office, and the President Biden was there and participated. Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, was there and participated. And I would describe it as a good conversation, a lot of back and forth, wide ranging, touched on a number of different topics within the framework of public safety. The president was engaged and active in the conversation, and I felt glad to have been invited and to tell Toledo's story. The reason we were invited is because, at least in the view of the White House, Toledo is one of those cities that is placing the proper emphasis on public safety via ARP. We're growing the size of our police department by roughly 100 officers because of the American Rescue Plan. We're also expanding shot spotter technology into East Toledo. We're investing in other tools and technologies that will help our police department. And we're also investing in grassroots safety efforts at the neighborhood level. All of those things add up to about $40 million of direct ARP investment in public safety. And then if you sort of expand the definition of public safety and look at things like youth programming and some of those other aspects of what we're doing, which maybe isn't quite the same as paying for the salary of a police officer, but you could make the argument as part of creating a healthier environment in our neighborhoods, well, then the number grows even larger. So I think the fact that we are appropriating, depending on how you define it, somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of all of our ARP dollars in public safety is a story that got the president's attention. It's why I was invited, and I was happy to be a part of the conversation.
I know there are those viewers out there that are watching this and seeing all of the gun violence that we've been experiencing this weekend, and it's been every day that there's been a new shooting that you turn on the news and you're finding out about. So for those viewers that are seeing this who likely aren't noticing any changes, what's your message to them?
Well, I think it just speaks to what a national problem this is and how difficult it is to produce the immediate results that we all want. Also in that meeting at the White House with me on Friday was the safety director for the city of Milwaukee. And that very night, there was a mass shooting event where I believe 20 different people were shot. I think it was a sort of an outdoor party where they were watching an NBA basketball game, a playoff game. So, no one is immune from this. Like I said, the safety director of Milwaukee was invited, and by the time his plane landed back home, he was dealing with a shooting of 20 individuals. It's an indication of how, no matter how much we want answers immediately and solutions today, to do this right involves, yes, enforcement, and the enforcement side of the equation is where policing comes in. That's why it is important that we're growing the size of the police department. But it also, a much larger piece of the puzzle is prevention and intervention. Those things are more important, actually, in creating an environment where violence won't occur in the first place. But those investments are going to take a while. If we're talking about making a positive change in the life of a child so that he doesn't turn to a life maybe in a gang or to get in one of these retaliatory situations, I believe in that, and I think that's part of the solution. That's not going to have happened by this weekend. So I think that's what I would say. I would say that the reason Toledo was invited to that meeting is because the president wanted to lift us up as an example of a city that was doing it right, just like he invited Milwaukee there as a example of a city that was doing it right. And yet, even that very weekend, there were demonstrations in both cities and other cities, from Buffalo to Los Angeles and everywhere in between, but this is a national problem that we're dealing with.
And these American Rescue Plan dollars, this is something that you're going to rarely have happen in local government, receiving such a large sum of money from the federal government. There are challenges when it comes to distributing that money and getting it out to the programs that need it the most. So when the money eventually runs out, what's going to be next for Toledo's future?
Well, I think that's why it's important that because the money does run out, and actually because there are deadlines for when Congress wants us to have spent the money, whether we want to or not. By the end of 2024, the rules say that this money has to be appropriated. That's why I think it's so important that we have, that among the things we are doing are making kind of one-time capital expenditures where there isn't a reoccurring cost. For instance, I would count this as something that will promote a more safer environment in our neighborhoods, even though we're not likely to see the benefits for a while. And what I'm talking about is the construction of the new Wayman Palmer YMCA. We're taking about $19 million of ARP money, and we are making it essentially one gigantic one-time expense for which we don't have to continue paying for 30 and 40 years after the ARP money runs out. That's an example of something, of a fixed cost that we're investing in, we're doing it, but it will reap benefits for a generation. Again, not a benefit that we're going to see this weekend, but that we will see, within the lifetime of kids who are living in Toledo right now, looking for hope that maybe they're currently lacking in their lives. So that's why I think the right way to approach the American Rescue Plan is a mix, a hybrid. Some things where there are immediate payoff and ongoing obligations, like adding more police. But also I think it's important to do things that are longer term, but maybe come with a fixed cost so that we don't have to worry about incurring what they call legacy costs. Once we build that YMCA, in other words, it's there. We don't have to keep paying for it.
There were many people that were happy to see how this money was appropriated, but there were also a few people that were wondering why more of their input wasn't taken into account. So if you were to redo this whole process of getting resident feedback, would there be anything that you would do differently?
There is not anything I would have done differently in terms of our local response to this opportunity. Now, I know that on Capitol Hill, I believe it was only Democrats who voted for it, and I think every single Republican voted against it. So I know there's back and forth along ideological lines about whether this was a good idea in the first place. But once it happened, we put a structure in place in Toledo that I'm very proud of. And I keep my ear pretty close to the ground. I don't know that there have been too many complaints that we didn't take the feedback of the citizens. In fact, I don't even know how that claim could be made with a straight face when you consider all of the neighborhood meetings we had, when you consider the surveys. I mean, over 2,000 different opinions came in via email, survey, direct contact. All of that was considered as we were building the Toledo Recovery Plan. And in fact, every single part of the plan was something we heard at the meetings. I've told the story. I said it at my State of the City address recently, but I'll say it again. We anticipated that we would hear lead line replacement from the citizens at these meetings and during these surveys. We thought that was a serious enough concern that the residents of Toledo would want us to remove any remaining lead service line. And we did hear it. But we were surprised that it came in number one on the list. In other words, that was the number one thing we heard at those neighborhood meetings and through the surveys and everything else. So we elevated it from something that we were going to do into something that we did first. That was literally the first expenditure we made, $10 million to replace all 3,000 customer side lead service lines. That doing that, in my judgment, is an indication that we took public input seriously. In other words, we certainly would not have done that first had we not heard from the public that was the most important thing they wanted us to do. So no, I feel very good about the local process we went through, the feedback, and the buy-in. As always, at the national level, there seemed to be yelling and screaming and fighting between Republicans and Democrats. But once the process moved to Toledo, I think we handled it very well. And at least on one topic, and at least in one person's opinion, meaning in this case the president's, we did such a good job responding to public input that we were invited to the White House last week to be lifted up as an example of one of the cities that is doing it right when it comes to spending this American Rescue Plan money.
And would it really be Washington without a little bit of yelling and screaming? So, that's.
They're good at it.
But it is good to see, though, at the local level that a lot is being done to make sure that it's still a democracy, that everyone has they have a voice so that they can express their ideas, because truly that's how we move into the future. And during your State of the City address, you talked about the future of Toledo, and you had a lot of these, they're no longer just bright ideas. We're actually seeing these things being put to work. So for people that have, not yet just seen the benefits of all of these things, what is your message to Toledo, and what is your outlook on what these next few years are going to hold for us?
Well, trust is important between the citizens and their government, whether it's city government, federal government. And I worry that the federal government may have lost the trust of the public. And I could understand that. I might understand why. But here locally, I think we do enjoy the support of the citizens. Doesn't mean that they always agree with us, but I think that there is a level of buy-in and trust that is healthy for democracy. And that's why it is so important for us to demonstrate that we did listen to them as we were building the plan, that we decided which expenditures to make first based on what they said. One of the points I made during my State of the City, it bears repeating, this $180 million that we're receiving from the American Rescue Plan, that doesn't represent some faraway promise that hopefully one day we'll act on. I made the point that City Council has already allocated $64 million of the total. That's 1/3 of the money has already been allocated. We're already doing these things. We've already allocated the money to replace every lead service line in the city of Toledo. We've already allocated the money to provide free youth recreation opportunities for kids. There are well over 100 free activities this summer. In fact, they're better than free, because in each one of these cases, well, you'll also get a free lunch if you show up you want to play basketball or volleyball or football. You want to learn horseback riding. You want to learn how to podcast. You want to learn how to do opera. You want to learn how to be in a drum line. All these things, again and again, they're all free. That's because we have already allocated these resources from the American Rescue Plan. In several examples, I talked about this $180 million opportunity, not as something in the distant future, but something where $1 out of every $3 have already been allocated and is already being put to use rebuilding our communities. So when you think about the future of Toledo, there's no question that what we've seen over the last 3 weeks or so with regard to gun violence, has tainted, the way we look at Toledo right now. I believe that Toledo, I've always believed that Toledo is a family. We feel like a family. And so whenever there's pain in our family, we all hurt. And I think that's what we're feeling right now because of this spike in violence. But if you're able to get past the grieving and look at some of the big picture trends in our city, they're very positive. Believe it or not, homicides, as heartbreaking as they've been in the last 3 weeks or so, they are down from where they were this time last year. We continue to win major awards for our economic development. Our unemployment rate is significantly down from where it was even last year. We're resurfacing more miles of road than we ever have before as a city. We're investing in our parks in a way that we have never invested in our parks. The site of my State of the City speech in the Glass City Metro Park was symbolic of the construction that we are undertaking right now. Toledo's future is bright. We have challenges just like any other big city, but we're meeting our challenges. And I think if Toledo were a stock, you'd want to buy because just like we are in a better position today than we were 2 years ago or 5 years ago, we'll be in an even better position 2 years and 5 years from now.
And it makes you wonder when some of us are going to retire that old, there's nothing to do in Toledo set, because especially for the youth this summer, there are plenty of programs, over 100 to get involved with. So it's about time it's about time we, take advantage of them and, we have them. So they're available. And of course, the city website, is a great place to find information on a lot of them. Toledo Mayor Wade Kapszukiewicz, thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thank you so much, Jaden.